Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. Today I'm looking at that firmware update for the Z9. Did it improve the autofocus, which has been my major concern with this body since it was released? We'll take a look at it right after this. Hot off the presses, I wanted to take a look at this right away because my biggest problem with the Z9, specifically for bird photography, has been if that focus point drops off to the background, it was reluctant. If not, it just refused to come back and focus. So even when the subject was right in the middle of the frame and your focus point is right on it, it would just not come back and focus. Now I'm going to show you, I'll reference my first video that I did on this. I did two videos on this Z9 and songbirds. I actually did a third video just specifically in the field with songbirds. So you can look at all those videos, but I'm going to show you a screenshot from the first video to illustrate this. And you could see my focus point is right on there. You could see the blob of subject that is not in focus, and it literally just refused to the point where you have to assign buttons to focus back or to manually dial it and pull it back. So once you're in the close proximity, it was fine. But again, once it dropped off to background, it would just not focus on the subject. So I'm going to show you the firmware notes on this real quick. Here we go. So I'll highlight the ones that I was most concerned about. So I could care less about high frequency flicker reduction. That's more for people working with lighting conditions in studio. There's some other fixes in here that I'm not going to focus on, because the big thing to me, the only thing I really cared about is, does this autofocus improve, and will it allow me to focus on a subject that should be in focus close to me when it has fallen off into the background. I've used this now for months with songbirds, and I will tell you, it's very, very, very good. It had this issue in the field though, without doubt. I missed shots in the field without a doubt. Would I scrap the Z9 because of it? No, it was just too good of a body. But I was really dying to get this issue fixed. So you could see right at the top, autofocus is now better at tracking small subjects, and autofocus now produces more accurate results. That one, by the way, I've never really had an issue with for detecting eye and face. I mean, if it's improved, that's great. And then here, fixed issue resulting in camera focusing to background in certain modes. I found it in every mode. I tested every mode on this, and I found it to be the case in every mode. And that's really this autofocus improvement is what I wanted to focus on. So here's what I did. Just like in my first video, I took it out in the field, and we're going to look at it through the camera, through the lens. And I'm just going to show you, and I'll freeze this at some points, and I'll show you. What I basically did is, I could not, by the way, duplicate the original setup. The area that I used originally has overgrown, and I don't have the ability to focus in the background and then pull back. So I shot this in a rain garden, and that rain garden is now really, really tall. So I couldn't do that. So what I did try to do is find a subject that I could reliably focus on at about the same distance. So I'm about 15 feet away from these flowers. I'm just going to run through the flowers real quick in this little pollinator garden that I have. This is called spiderwort. I got a swamp milkweed up here. I'm going to focus on that. And you could see in this range, when everything's 10 to 20 feet away, there's absolutely no problems with this. It's only when it jumps off to the background. I'm going to focus and pause on this leaf. This leaf was very interesting to me because this is my bird. I didn't need a moving subject for this. The issue was not tracking moving subjects. Had no issue at all so far tracking moving subjects. And if they improve that in the firmware, that's great, because I didn't think it was a huge necessity. This simulates the size of a small bird to me. So it's about 6 inches, probably, this leaf, and it's yellow on a green background. So this is going to be a subject that I keep coming back to. Again, I don't need it moving. I just need it there. So I'm going to focus on these far trees. These trees, I'm guessing, are about 70 feet away. And then I'm going to see if it pulls back focus into those flowers that I just showed you. So here's the first one, that leaf I wanted to go to, and boom, no problem. So far, so good, right? So I'm going to go back to this distant background, and I'm going to come down here and look for this plant right here. Is called spiderwort. And you could see it hopped a little bit, like it jumped a little bit. The reluctance before this update is that it wouldn't even attempt to come back. It would just sit there. My feel was, after using this for about 15 or 20 minutes outside, is that now when it senses anything different, it's making this push to pull back. Push to pull back is probably the wrong phrasing. It's making an attempt to force it back and then look for these contrast detections. By the way, I also did this with my D500. Now, I couldn't screen record that, but I did take my D500 out and used a single point focus in this same scenario. And I'll tell you what I saw as similarities and differences in just a second. All right, so there we see no problems here. And again, now that I'm focused close, I could go to any of these flowers. these little yellow flowers. These are Coreopsis. I could, no problem there. And I can go right back to that leaf. All right, now let me jump off and see if I can get a tougher acquisition. And there it is. That's the tough one. You could see it. You could see the yellow blob there. That's the focus that I want to achieve. I just achieved it when I was close, but I've got a much tougher situation here. I've got high contrast. I've got a fence back there that's going to come into play, and it is focused on those plants in the background. By the way, I would not necessarily expect any camera to perform great in this situation. I did test the D500 here, and the D500 actually struggled a little bit, but you're using a different type of focus. So you're using, on this one, on the Z9, you're using this contrast detection. On the other one, you're using phase detection, and phase detection works better in these scenarios. So while the D500 struggled, it did eventually find this plant in this exact same situation. It pulled it back a little bit, and then eventually it was able to capture it, and it focused. But it did not do it instantaneously. So again, this is a pretty challenging situation. The Z9 could not really do this. So you could see it did pull back. This is encouraging because at least it pulled back a little bit, and it found the fence. Now, to get off of that fence is very, very difficult. So not necessarily disappointed that it couldn't do that. Here, I'm going to go over to this purple plant, this spiderwort, and you can see now I'm finding the grass in the background because it's high contrast. And I'm not really able to grab the spiderwort until I get into a bigger, denser cluster. But again, it did pull back. It did try to come back and grab that. So not bad. I'm feeling better, by the way, about this so far as I'm doing this. Now, this was a tough one because I've got one little tiny flower, and I'm trying to come off of those blades of grass in the background. I didn't expect this to perform well. It could not handle this. But as soon as I came down into another cluster, or again, back to that yellow leaf, no problem. Now I'm going to test it a couple times with that yellow leaf again, or that yellow flower. Can't do it, but the yellow leaf over here, I'm going to grab there and see, and no problem. So it didn't have any problem with that yellow leaf. I'm going to do a couple series now where I focus on that fence, and that fence is pretty tough because it's high contrast. Easy to focus on, but tough to come off of. So now I'm going to come over to this yellow again. Boom, no problem. You can see it's actually pulling it back to find it. And I'm going to come up and just test a couple other ones. Same thing, no problem. So the only thing, I think a bird just flew in front of me there. The only thing I really had an issue with is this right here, this really difficult scenario. So I haven't used it in the field with birds live, but I didn't need to test this. This could be done in a controlled environment like this without any problem. Couldn't simulate the original video, but I can tell you just by using it, intuitively, it felt better. It felt like it was making an attempt to come back on the subjects. So yeah, I feel okay about it. I'll make a couple more little swipes here at this purple plant to see if I can get it. And you can see right here, it doesn't want to grab it yet. It needed me to come down to get a little bit more of that cluster. So it's on the grass, having a tough time. Even there, having a tough time, and there it came in. So no problems here. It just felt better. I do think there's an improvement here. I was encouraged, anxious to get it out in the field and see if it is actually an improvement. I took this out. I wanted to test with hummingbirds. I've got a hummingbird hanging around. Couldn't get him in the yard today. I wanted to test to see if that small subject detection did improve. That's going to be a tough one to actually show and document. This one was a lot easier to document because it was so obvious in the first video that I did that comparing this to that, I'm feeling pretty good. So again, as a wildlife photographer, don't really care about all these other upgrades that they did, all the other changes. All I care about from this release, this firmware update, was autofocus. And is it an improvement? I'm feeling it's a yes. So I'm feeling pretty good about this one. More to come. There's also a couple other firmware updates to the FTZ adapter. I'll cover those in a different video. But I just wanted to highlight the firmware changes to the Z9 around autofocus for wildlife. Hope you found this one helpful. Thanks for your support on the channel. And as always, I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.